Hello, everybody, and welcome to the series Conscious Aging of the wisdomfactory.net. I'm Heidi Hörnlein, and I'm here in beautiful Italy where the spring is glowing. And today I'm talking with Karen Voorhees, and she is in beautiful California. Say hello, Karen.
Hello. Yes, spring is blooming here. The cherry trees are blossoming. It's been raining, but the plums are starting. It's lovely here too.
Wonderful. So we got to know each other by Integral Life, the new forum, and you told me that you have to say something about conscious aging and conscious dying. And as that is our topic since quite a while, actually it was originated by Mark Davenport, who was my co-founder of the Wisdom Factory, who now is dead, unfortunately, and that's why I did a conscious dying series. But I was committed to continue the discussion because it is important that we get out of the closet these topics. Yes. Because aging, we all age and we all will die and nobody wants to know about it. Isn't it better if we a little bit know what is coming our way and we can learn out of the experience of other people. So before we go into the conversation, I would invite you, Karen, to introduce you a little bit, and then we start.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with Heidi. I'm 67. I'm aging. My body is aging. It cannot do the things it used to do. I do try to stay physically active, but I have to adapt and accept that things that I could do 10 years ago or even a year ago, if I try to do them now, I'll injure myself. So this is in my face right now, that my body is aging. My further background is that my husband, who's a retired MD, Arzt auf Deutsch, he took an early retirement so we could travel. I mean, we wanted to take long trips to Europe, for instance. Within a year after he retired, two of our parents came down with very critical end-of-life issues. So we spent the next 3 years traveling between the Bay Area and Southern California, 400 miles away. We spent so many hours up and down the state of California on I-5. Basically, we spent the next 3 years running home hospices for dying parents. We lost a parent a year for 3 years in a row, one after the other. And then since then, we ran the home hospice for my mother, and I've helped out with late life, end of life, and dying issues for 2 childless aunts and a childless uncle. So I've had a chance to see this close up. And I want to say, as just part of my introduction, that my own spiritual practice, I've been meditating regularly for 38 years. And my integral studies, the whole circle around Ken Wilber, my sense of the larger picture. I could not have done what I did with my parents and my other elderly relatives and certain friends now who are reaching late life and end of life issues. I couldn't be present with them the way I was if I didn't have that background of meditation and a larger understanding. I will make a very bold statement, and this is through my meditation. I don't see a difference between birth and death anymore. It's a passage. We are leaving the way of life we've known. Get to a point where we're under crushing distress, perhaps. I mean, everything we know is crumbling around us. We are in darkness. We are in a passage. Then it's a tunnel. There's light at the end of the tunnel. There are beings there waiting to greet us with love. Is this a birth or is this a death? It just depends on which side of the tunnel you're standing on, whether you see it as a birth or a death.
So
death is not an ending. It's an ending of one chapter and a beginning of a next chapter. And I'll just warn everybody straight off, you don't have to believe in reincarnation or life after death to have that sense that it's simply a passage to whatever comes next. And that plus the ability to be present. Okay.
Yeah. So you have already introduced the title of today's conversation, which is Spirituality, Aging, and Dying. So what I hear you say is spirituality for you is the main thing, how you deal with your own aging and how you deal with the dying of people around you. I mean, when we are in our age, I'm more or less your age, then it happens. It seems everybody around you begins to get weaker and is about to die, which you didn't notice when you were 40, you know?
It wasn't happening when we were 40.
No, maybe a parent can happen, you know, when you're 40, but your own peer, people dying. And so you cannot miss to not be reminded about the process we are entering, you know. And as you say, things which you did with 30, maybe you don't do it anymore. I see it now. We are cutting down alberi, now I'm talking Italian, trees around, and I helped today to stack the wood, you know, and then you feel it in your back. And you know, 30 years ago, I have a young person here still a few days to help me. He is exactly the age when I came here in the countryside of Italy and began the land life with, you know, doing everything and working 9 hours a day physically. And today, after an hour or so, I think, oh, I could, but do I really want to do that anymore?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And maybe it's not so good for you to do it anymore.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still can do it, but you know, I also want to stay active and do something, but not 8 hours anymore, as I did before.
Yes. Now there's another side to this, and as a historian, I see this expecting to live into old age is so new on the face of the earth. Up, 200 years ago, let's go back to, say, 1800, the average life expectancy in the world was around 30, maybe 35 in the most developed countries. Go up to 1900, the average life expectancy was 40 in the most developed countries. I mean, Annie Besant, who was writing, I think, in 1905, wrote something about how unless you're very young, of course, you've lost somebody close to you in death. Well, that's not true anymore. Another piece of his fact, in 1935, when Social Security was created in the United States, the average life expectancy was 65. So the age at which you can start drawing on Social Security was the average life expectancy anyway. Now it's 80 and above in a few places. I mean, to expect as a matter of course to live into old age is so new on the planet, and it's not the exception anymore, it's the rule. And so now we're faced with a whole new way of existing that we never had to before.
Yeah, what I want to insert here, what I heard, life expectancy for who is born now is going down again because of all the poisons and all the things which are threatening our health in our surroundings. So it seems to be going less. So, yeah, but yeah, we have arrived at this age, and actually this in itself is a miracle, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is. And this is the point that you made with your whole intention with this series is to overcome the denial and I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. If I don't have to look at it, it isn't real. And I have personally witnessed how much that increases the suffering. I mean, some suffering is inevitable, but we increase it through our denial. And I'm seeing this now with some friends who are very close to me, who are facing late life issues and maybe end of life issues, and they have denied the reality of their situation. They go, I will think positive, right? This is very American, right? Think positive. Never say die. We're a never say die culture. Well, that only works for you for so long because, like you said, inevitably, if we were born, we will die. If this body everybody that was born will die. And to deny that, I mean, to set, like we've done in the United States, especially to set up that death is a defeat and a failure. I mean, what a terrible position to put yourself in. We need to change that whole mental construct culturally.
And aging is a disease. It's an illness, you know. We have to medicate it because
yeah.
maybe we get reborn immediately when we take enough pills or, I don't know, or surgery to take off the wrinkles, you know, so at least we cannot see that we are getting older. No?
Oh my God, I was just in Coachella Valley, you know, Palm Springs with my husband. He likes to go down there because it's warm there in January and his body doesn't warm itself. You know, he's aging too. So there we are, and we're in this fancy resort. And I treated myself to a massage for my birthday. And the only other guest in the spa was a woman who had had so much plastic surgery. She looked grotesque. She didn't look human. She was so sweet. We had such a sweet interaction with each other. But I had to really be very aware not to stare at these grotesque lips and these eyes. I mean, she didn't even look human to me. She looked like a related but alien species. And just like, to do this to yourself, to think that this is what you have to do to be okay, to be accepted, like, how tragic. And this is why I refuse to wear makeup anymore. I mean, I put on lipstick just for this because I'm aware that if you're appearing on camera, that's a whole separate, I mean, that's a whole separate thing. So just, you know, I'm okay as I am. This is part of my hippie chick rebellion. I mean, we are, and this is part of my spirituality too. I'll back up a step further up the ladder of abstraction here. We are all expressions of the infinite. We are all of us ways in which the infinite is choosing to express itself in manifestation. And the way my spiritual path puts this in very concrete terms is, if you're looking at another human being, you're looking at God. And this is part of the positive part of the green meme, the unmean part of the green meme, is to see the inherent dignity and worth of every human being as we are. Means I don't need to put on makeup before appearing in public. I'm fine as I am. And this is part of the conscious aging. We boomers, we narcissistic boomers, maybe we can, that's a positive thing we can bring into aging.
Yeah, and I don't put on makeup anymore. I mean, I did it when I was a classical singer and I had to go to a concert. Then I looked like a, I don't know what, but not like me. It happened that once I did a concert, my mother was in the audience and she didn't recognize me.
Yes.
But, you know, I'm also a postmodern person in the German way, back to nature thing. And that's why I also came to Italy. And I want to live as natural as possible. And that means I don't use a lot of, I use oil for the skin, you know, argan oil from Africa. This, but nothing really, you know, if people were like me, all the cosmetic industry would go bankrupt.
Yes, I remember reading a calculation, this was about 10, 15 years ago, with the money that is spent globally on cosmetics alone, that money applied to known solutions to end poverty, that's enough to end dire poverty, the kind of poverty where you go to bed hungry, where you don't have enough calories to stay healthy. We could end dire poverty if we freed those resources just from what we spend on cosmetics alone.
Sure. And then, you know, what is even more grotesque, that I see young girls with 15, 16, then they put makeup like this while they still have this rosy skin and don't appreciate that. So in any age, we try to be different. And we mutilate ourselves in some way or other to be different. And we don't actually really know what we should be. Just different, you know.
Yes, and this is kind of the neurosis. We think it's not okay to be exactly what we are. And here's one of my hobby horses is our mass commercial media, the commercial media. And in the United States, it's especially ungeheuer, monstrous. These ads and programs that make us insecure about who we are, whether, you know, our hair's balding or we have toe fungus, or, you know, people are laughing at you if you don't have a full head of hair. These ads that make us more insecure than we already are in order to sell us products we don't need. This is one of the reasons for obesity. I mean, if you ever watch commercial TV in the United States, I mean, it's just one ad after another for processed food that's not good for us. I mean, it's literally, I feel like one of the geese that's being raised for foie gras, the way they ram food down its throat. I mean, this is what our mass commercial media is doing to us with all of these products that we don't need, that are not necessarily good for us. And until we become conscious of that and pull back from it, a lot of these other things we want to see to move forward are going to be very difficult. Living a healthier life, more in tune with who and what we really are on the inside, and saying, who I am, that's who I am. Now, how am I going to wisely move forward from here? But just, and this is part of the spirituality, is being really present exactly as I am now. And this is part of the overcoming the denial, because it's this denial that we have to look young, we have to be healthy, we have to achieve, or whatever the European version of that is. And as our bodies age, and eventually our minds lose the surface dexterity, we do grow wiser. This has been researched, but we can't chew into the world in those ways anymore. And to have this self-sense that says that's not okay. I mean, how sad, how tragic to be doing that to ourselves, instead of really just being present. What is coming up in me right now? What is the situation outwardly and inwardly right now? What is a wise way to deal with it right now? And this is where, go ahead.
This is for all ages,
Yes.
be a spiritual path, to come to an acceptance of ourselves.
Yes.
And to not follow anymore the projections of other people, and really become aware of who we are. And it seems to be that when we age, we have a little bit more chance to do that, because we get sort of wiser, or it seems to be that by being forced to let go of certain things, we sort of get used to let go more of our fixed ideas.
Yes.
And maybe also that it could become a chance for us to learn self-acceptance, which we unfortunately never had in young years.
And I think that also tends to happen naturally anyway. I had the experience, and this was back in the early 1990s, of traveling with my mother, who was then in her late 70s. She traveled with the Livermore Seniors group, because my father didn't like to travel. And she would take me along on these trips because it was difficult for her to handle her suitcases and just the tickets and so on. So she would pay for me to come along as a companion. And what I realized was that the other people on these trips, they were typically in their 60s and 70s, with a very occasional early 80s in there. These people, I was in my late 40s, I think. These people were wonderful company. I had a whale of a good time with them. And so I asked myself why, and I realized they're comfortable in their own skins. I mean, because, if we can relax a little bit, we look in the mirror in the morning, we know we're not young anymore. We know we're not matching. We have no chance of ever achieving that artificial Hollywood standard if we ever did. We've let go of that, and we've started to realize who we are innately in our own personalities, and we're much more comfortable in our own skins. And now I've reached that age level myself. Right. But I observe that to just kind of happen kind of naturally, if we're not too if we're not too messed up. That's kind of a natural evolution anyway. And I'd like to take this a step farther, if you don't mind. This group that's forming around the online forum, the Integral Forum, with Ryan and the other people and you. And I've met a few other people through Terry Patton and his New Republic of the Heart. And this is the reason I went back to reread Ken Wilber's Boomeritis. It's the geeks and the geezers. Are those terms current in German? I mean, the people who are pushing forward into Integral are the people who are under 35 and 60 and over, because the ones in the middle are very busy with careers and children. I mean, they're plugged into the world like we were. But the ones who are really pushing forward into that next level up are the youngsters, people like Ryan, his age.
Yeah.
And people our age, the geeks and the geezers, as Ken Wilber called it. And I'm seeing this coalescing now. And I'm thinking, wow, Ken Wilber called it again.
That's right. Yeah, we are trying to do our part, and this is also the reason why I do these shows, no? Because our intention when we created them was to bring the integral worldviews to people without talking too much about theory. And I know you are doing that too.
And it's easy to talk the theory with people who also know it, because these are thrilling, life-giving, life-affirming and life-giving ideas. I know what they've done for my life. And it's easy to go into the lingo. And it's so much fun to hang out with people who are crazy the same way I'm crazy. But we've got to transmute it into a form that can connect with the rest of humanity.
Exactly. So do you want to talk a little bit more about the influence of your spiritual path on this aging, or even the dying process you have witnessed? So
Sure.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, let's start with it. Let's jump in the deep end first. I like to do things that way with dying. There comes when death is slow, and I've been there with it. This is one of the whole points of the hospice movement. When someone who is actively dying, and then there's nothing more the doctors can do for them, and nothing more you can do to stop the process. Until the hospice movement really took hold, such patients, such people tended to be abandoned by the medical caregivers. There's nothing more we can do for you. We'll move on to somebody we can do something for. Or people say, oh, we can't tell her she's dying. I mean, well, she knows. If she's dying, she knows she's dying. Yeah. She knows something's going on. I mean, whatever kind of denial she's in, somewhere in her she knows. And she's alone because nobody will talk with her about it. Such people tended to be so abandoned at the end of their lives. And this is one thing my spiritual path did for me, is just being present. I mean, being really present, being transparent. This has also helped with my own shadow work. Mm-hmm. Really being transparent to myself about what's coming up, or being totally present with what's happening around me without trying to control it, direct it, change it, alter it, interpret it, diagnose it, advise it. Because so much of what we do with people who are suffering in any way, you know, what you say to somebody who's just suffered a severe loss. So, oh, don't be sad, don't cry. We're trying to put them out of our pain, right?
Exactly.
And so an absolutely essential foundation is to be present with our own pain and discomfort, and be able to just be present and let it be there. Let it be awkward. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it be painful. Let it be unbearable. Be there. Let it come. Let it pass. Be there. Hold their hand. When you can do nothing else for another human being, you can be present with them with your full attention. And this is my bottom line here. The most precious gift we can give another human being is our attention. And I will take this theoretical. We'll bring it practical again soon. In my spiritual path, Sant Mat, the teachers say, attention is the outgoing faculty of the soul being our highest self, our total self, totality. I mean, one taste, as Ken Wilber calls it, however you want to talk about it, nirvana, your Buddha nature. Attention, when we are putting attention on anything, we are putting our soul energy, and that is energy. That's the highest form of energy. Look what children will do for our attention. Look what anybody will do for attention. Wherever we put our attention is where our life energy goes. And that is such a powerful theory that I'm kind of afraid to tell people, because you can put it in negative ways. If we put our attention on the middle of the lane, our car or our bicycle goes down the middle of the lane. If our attention wanders off there, the car's going to go off there. Wherever we put our attention at any level, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, that's where our life goes. Our attention is energy, wherever we put our attention. So the most precious gift, this is the conclusion, the most precious gift we can give another human being is our pure attention. And we can always give that, unless we are in deep distress ourselves, in which we need to give ourselves the attention. But this is what I learned the hard way. By sitting with one dying parent or step parent after another. And there is one especially, my husband's mother, who she had a very difficult process. And I mean, there was a period when she was wailing. If she was not asleep, she was wailing.
Mm.
There was nowhere in the house you could be and not hear her wailing. It was because she couldn't control the world. She used to control her world through speaking. And she'd had a series of strokes and couldn't speak anymore. And she would wake up and start trying to talk, and the words wouldn't come, and she'd start wailing. So, my husband was dealing with the medical stuff. I mean, she had medical care from her son. Like, you can't pay for that. She had the best medical. He was titrating everything about her. And he knew how to see if you're uncomfortable, but you can't speak, how to, and his sister was taking care of all the legal financial stuff. But I sat there with her and held her hand, and I did my mantra. I would meditated when she was asleep, and I just sat with her while she was awake. And I had a few amazing experiences there. I think I channeled her deceased sister at one point, the only time something like that's ever happened to me. And that was actually very consoling to her. And every now and then, when she was able to actually hear me, I would just say things that I knew. I learned learning by experience. I learned what she could hear and would calm her. Now, this was interesting. She was Catholic, devoutly Catholic. If I tried to talk about the Blessed Mother or her favorite saints or anything, she would just wail harder. That distressed her. But if I talked about her deceased sister, she would actually listen and say, your sister Marcy is preparing a party for you. She's in heaven, because she adored her sister, and she would never believe her sister didn't go to heaven. And nobody ever said no to Marcy. Even God could not say no to Sister Marcy. So she's preparing a big party for you. My mother-in-law loved hearing that. So I talked. So, about every 3 or 4 hours, when she was calm enough to listen to me, I'd tell her about this party, your sister in heaven. I was just making this stuff up, right? I thought. And I'd get more elaborate, and I'm here, and I love you, and I'm taking care of you, and your son Billy Boy's here, he loves you, he's taking good care. And I'd name all the people who were there, and she'd listen. And then Marcy, your sister in heaven, was preparing, and she'd really listen. And so over time, I would just elaborate on the party. And I thought, and Ronald Reagan is there, because she adored Ronald Reagan. I thought I was making this stuff up. And then one day, as I was holding her hand, and she's just looking at me, I mean, she couldn't move from her neck down. She could move the muscles of her face. She couldn't move anything in her body by then. And I called it my litany, literally, because it was a very set piece that I knew by experience she would hear. And all of a sudden, it's like the air, I swear, the temperature in the room got 10 degrees colder. I got goosebumps. I felt this pressure, and words just started coming out of my mouth, and I was babbling. And it wasn't stuff. I mean, something was speaking through me. I was babbling about this party. This one who had not moved for months, she lifted her head up off the bed. I mean, her upper shoulders too, and turned, sideways, looking at me like that. And I'm babbling, and I'm not in control of this. And she had not spoken a coherent word for, I think, 6 months. And she said, "Show me." Really fiercely. And I went, "You'll have to ask Marcy, your sister." And she said, and she kind of shook her head like, "Shut up, you fool." And she said, "Marcy's right behind you." And I wasn't looking at me. She was, and it just, I felt this energy, and I'm not psychic. I usually don't feel anything like this, thank God, but I felt this kind of whoosh, and I just kind of felt energetically like I'd been kind of knocked askew. And that was so Marcy. She was a powerhouse. She was a steaming locomotive charging at full speed, like this whoosh. And I just shut up. Okay. And my mother-in-law, she kept her whole shoulders and head upraised, looking like that intently for about 10 seconds. It seemed like a long time. And then she just very quietly laid her head back down. All the muscles in her face relaxed. Every muscle in her face had been so clenched. If she was awake, she was clenched like that, but everything unclenched. And she went very peacefully to sleep. And then she woke up a couple hours later wailing again, but it's like, I have never had any other experience like that. If that was channeling, I hope I never do it again. But funny things happen when you meditate a lot, but just sitting there and being present with her. And if nothing else, that was very meaningful to my husband, whose mother it was, and my sister-in-law, whose mother it was, that they couldn't bear to be around it. Nobody else could bear to be around it. My job was to sit there and hold her hand, and I could do it because of that background of just sitting there and being present with whatever was happening without feeling I had to change it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to
Yeah,
it.
thank you for your story. And while you were telling it, I got goosebumps. Really, I felt it everywhere. Oh,
I was reliving it too.
wow, wow, this is powerful.
Yeah. And she had a very peaceful passing. We were there.
How long after that?
Oh, it was a number of months.
Still, oh, she was so long
Yeah, she was fighting it.
immobile. Oh, wow.
Yes, and this was her worst fear. This had been her worst fear her whole life, of being incapacitated, still in her body, incapacitated. But she was also terrified to die. And I will say this, stick my neck out. Everyone who was raised Catholic I have known well enough to know this about them has been terrified of dying, however devout they were, or however much they no longer believe it consciously. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, how sad. I mean, like you said, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
We're all going to die. Why should it be terrifying? It's as natural as breathing. It's as natural as being born, as eating, as any bodily function. Why terrifying?
If you from culturally have always heard this and were filled of fear. And I actually want to mention here, and I did a show with a German psychotherapist, and he is doing sessions with mushrooms and psychedelics. And he told about his mother. She was in fear, and she was 70, and he did 2 sessions with her, and she had lost completely the fear of dying. And he sees that as a big, big, big chance for people when they have fear to really do some psychedelic research in the other states of consciousness and lose the fear. I know it's not everywhere legal, but and don't do it alone. He said, don't do it alone, to be accompanied. But this would be the solution for so many problems, he says, in the world. Because he says he had 4 near-death experiences, and he just knows that, death is nothing to fear.
Yes.
And he says it's so beautiful because he lives completely differently.
Yes.
Because it's a life-affirming thing that that death is not what you think it to be. But when everybody tells you now, oh, death is not so bad and you should, but then you try to do it mentally, to change your belief system mentally, and tell yourself, oh yeah, everybody says that death is only a transition and you don't have to fear anything and there comes the light. But as long as you don't have experienced it, and I actually haven't experienced it yet, so there is still this remainder of fear. And there seems to be ayahuasca trips, for instance, they can help you, obviously, to completely lose the fear because you have a glimpse behind the curtain. I just mentioned it because I found it deadly interesting what he told me, but it's in German, so you need to.
Well, there's a comparable book in English by Michael Pollan, who's Pollan, Michael Pollan, and I think it's called Changing Your Mind. He's very famous for writing excellent books about food and nutrition. I recommend all of his books. But he recently researched psychedelics, and he gives a very interesting history. Apparently, after they were demonized and criminalized, certainly in the United States back in the 60s and 70s, research has gone on by serious researchers under kind of in the shadows, simply because of its potential for things like you just said. And that's starting to come out of the shadows now, as we're slowly moving to decriminalizing substances, which I think would be a huge step forward. Regulating, yes, but definitely decriminalizing. But the potential, for instance, for cannabis to help with post-traumatic stress disorder, which especially among our veterans in the U.S., and with these entheogens, there's something called the psychedelics. Entheogen is one term because people see God, or they have these transcendent experiences that release them from the fear of death just as much as a near-death experience or so on. Now, I've come to I believe myself to be free of fear of death. I could, of course, be kidding myself. I came through that through a much longer route through meditation and meditative experiences. I have not had a near-death experience or even a conscious out, sort of on the edge of that conscious out of the body experiences. But that complete freedom from the fear of death, this is starting to come out that these substances can help us. But again, Michael Pollan stressed, you don't want to do it alone. You want to do it with a guide who is experienced and recommended, and do your due diligence and get recommendations and so on.
And coming back again on drugs, there is such a war on these substances which really can help to open your mind and your consciousness, while smoking and alcohol is sort of,
yes,
you can do that. And it's so much more dangerous to be hooked for the whole life on that independently, no?
It is so preposterous. That's a whole other substance. I mean, why these things like cannabis and psychedelics got demonized and criminalized, while alcohol and tobacco, which are so much more harmful to us individually and to society. It's
also to consciousness, because it's dimming down consciousness, makes us stupid.
And the harm it's done internationally, what our United States drug policies have done to places like Mexico and Colombia, these are the reasons we're flooded by immigrants, because drug gangs have taken over huge chunks of the countryside. I mean, I could get really steamed up about this. It's our own benighted drug policies that have caused a lot of the problems in these so-called less developed countries. So, yes, just decriminalizing substances, recognizing some of them as public health problems like alcoholism. I mean, that's in my novel. I'm writing a novel set 11,000 years ago, and they've invented beer recently. And now there's this real problem. Everybody wants to drink their bread instead of eating it. Flüssiges Brot, they call beer in Germany, liquid bread. Let's all just ferment it and get drunk and be happy all the time. Well, this is the end of civilization. Humanity cannot withstand the impact of the invention of beer. That was their equivalent of global warming. But we've had these problems all along. And the way to deal with them is by acknowledging that they're a problem, and by treating them as a public health problem and helping the individuals, criminalizing them. We've seen it. Well, we've seen it with prohibition. We can get off that.
Coming back, I want to make a little curve here to beer, and and then we had Catholicism and the repression of your emotions and so on. I think especially cultures who are working very much with repression of the self, we sometimes need a little beer or something to be able to speak.
Yes. Oh, yes. I was in Germany. Yes. That's the whole Fasching thing. The
thing is,
carnival.
The abuse is the problem, not the thing itself. If you drink as much that you finally lose a little bit of the filters and the barriers which normally hold you back in chains, that's fine in my opinion. But then you abuse it, but that means then a self-control, which we also do not learn in our culture,
Well, but it's on the way too. And here we get back to Ken Wilber and the whole integral, the different stages of personality development match the stages of cultural development over the century and millennia. At every next level up, we have had to learn a new level of self-control. This is true individually, as the terrible twos, and we learn to control our impulses. We learn to have some control over emotions, and the repression is where that goes too far. But so we had to learn how to have a society in spite of beer. We had to learn how to have a society in spite of crossbows. When crossbows were first invented in the Middle Ages, people said, "Oh, this is the end of humanity. We will all destroy each other." Well, every level, and I've tracked this as a historian, has had its necessity to learn another level of self-control at that next level of functioning. So far, we've done it. We've come all the way up, but learning to do it without the repression. And this is where Ken Wilber, some of his work is so brilliant, where you can have an addiction or you can have an allergy. Okay, beer helps you loosen. We're learning not to just act on our impulses anymore. That's how we can live in settled towns. In the age of agriculture, we're all on top of each other year round in these larger towns, not in the little scattered bands where you can go off with another band if you can't stand so-and-so. Well, now we have to get along with the same people year after year after year in the same place. And so we learn not to just act on our impulses all the time. Well, there are healthier and less healthy ways to do that. At every level, then we learn to control, not just to pop off in temper, or learning not to just drink beer whenever we want to drink beer, not just to eat whatever we want to eat whenever we want to eat it, now that we have enough to eat all the time. At every level, but then we learn to do it, but then we learn to go back and do it without repression. Sometimes the repression is the price we pay for making up to that next level. The repression is when we're still deeply attracted to it and we're not quite in control yet, so we have to repress in order to take that step up. In order to take that, we have to push, but then we learn to reintegrate if things go well. This is the transcend and include of Ken Wilber.
And that's the point. That's the point. And that's often not done.
Yes. And we're left with a lot of messes on the way up. And then we have to go back and do our own shadow work, because if we've repressed something and it's still down there, but we're not permitting it to come up and we're not allowing ourselves to be conscious of it, that's when we start projecting our shadow onto others. So we say, burn her as a witch. She's a black magic woman. She's going to make a devil out of me. I'm not quite in control of my sex drive, but I know it's wrong to just take any woman I am attracted to and throw her on the ground and do what I want with her. No, that's bad. I shouldn't, I mustn't. But she's putting a spell on me. I can't ignore. She's putting a spell on me. She's a witch. Burn her at the stake, or the conservative preachers who are so anti-gay, who preach against fire and brimstone against homosexuality. It's against the will of God. And how many of them have turned out to be closet homosexuals?
Yeah, sure.
So this is
psychological truth.
Yes.
What you fight most is what you have in yourself, which you don't want to see. So
this is why it's so important as we work in the world on our societies and our systems and our science and our technologies and our spiritual paths, to also be working on our own messy innards, our shadow work. And Ken Wilber's had a lot to say about this too, because that if we've repressed it, that doesn't mean it stops existing. Emotions are just energy. Emotion, it's Latin, it's emotion, it's energy. And energy cannot matter, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it's a basic law of physics, but they can be transmuted into other forms. And we can take these energies, these densities, and we can transmute them into higher octaves. And go ahead.
So let's see, how can we put this, what you said now, into the aging process?
Yes,
and
because our denial, because the denial, yes, I thought that's where you want the denial of aging and the terror of death and the fear of death, to have the presence and the awareness to sit with that and look at it and let it appear and face it, not repress it, not demonize it, not to go ahead and try another exercise program or another fad diet if that's what you want to do, but allow that fear to come up, face it, just like exactly what you're trying to do with this series. And it's not easy work, and it helps to have the company of other people, and it helps to have the guidance of people who are experienced with this, or trained and experienced, to face these things. Our fear, what am I really afraid of? And usually there are many. In my experience of shadow work and inner work, there are usually levels. It takes a while to kind of allow one to come up and work with it in a way that, okay, now I've transcended and included that. I'm no longer denying it, repressing it, projecting it. Then there's another level below that. And usually there's another level below that and another level below that. And it takes time. It takes a lot of energy. Attention is energy. But it's essential that we do this, especially as we go into our future together. And that was my whole shtick with Ryan. As we go into the next level up, with these new technologies and our new consciousness, going up to higher levels of consciousness. If we don't do our own shadow work, we will take that shadow up with us, and it will make trouble. And it will make further trouble at that new, more powerful level. And we've seen that humanity has been through 6 major transitions. I mean, we've done it before, we'll do it again. But yes, it's time to overcome our denial of, and fear of death, dying, aging. Face it, the first thing. Be calm enough in ourselves to face it, and we can help each other with this. We can be present for each other with this. And just start by simply accepting what is here now, being present with it. And that's the basic spirituality to me, is being present without trying to change it, judge it, diagnose it, advise it away, allow what is to arise. Allow it to arise. We are the sky. We are not the clouds. We are the sky in which allow them to arise, and then they can transform.
Yeah, and for that you need guidance too, because when you allow these things to arise, new fear comes up, and
yes.
So how to handle this fear? So,
it's good not to be alone for this.
Yeah, absolutely, and to have a sort of a community, or at least some people with whom it's possible to talk about these things.
Yes.
But I want to come back. You talked about the new technologies, and I'm very fearful. I wouldn't say fearful, but preoccupied that we don't do the people who will program the new, let's say, machines, haven't done the shadow work, that they might be programmed by people who, how can I say, who better shouldn't decide about our destiny.
Well, I take great comfort, and this is something I've thought a lot about, and it's at the core of my fiction writing too. You cannot program consciousness. Consciousness is not, this is one of, Ken Wilber, man, consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain. The brain does not, our physical brains do not create consciousness. Now, there's some people who say the consciousness creates the brain and matter. I see it as a duality. Consciousness, the pure consciousness, and matter energy, the manifested universe, they co-arise like the north and south poles of a magnet. Mm-hmm. One is, excuse me, neither one is reducible to the other. Our brains are very, very, very subtle machines. To me, a physical brain is like my radio. It receives certain bandwidths and transmutes them into a form I can hear with my ears and my sensory apparatus. It does not create the programs. And this, you can get into subtle bodies, and Ken Wilber very carefully avoids that. But no computer, no AI will ever replace human beings, because consciousness, now I'm going to use a metaphor. Consciousness comes from the 8th dimension. As long as we're dealing with 3-dimensional objects in matter, in space-time, in the material world, we cannot create consciousness. No one can put a soul into a machine, no matter how subtle. That comes from somewhere outside. I'm not worried about AIs taking over humanity. And now we have plenty of other things to be very concerned about. But for me, the conscience, the social systems, the political systems, the cultural systems will always co-arise with the material systems. And here's where Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants analysis is spot on. All 4 quadrants co-arise and co-evolve. If one gets too far ahead of all the others, then there's a great breakdown and a dark age, and then we build again. And we've had dark ages in the past. These periods of transition tend to be periods of great turbulence, but our consciousness will continue to evolve. Our social systems will continue to evolve. Our society, our social structures and infrastructures will co-evolve along with the evolving technology and science. So what will program these, what will really program these will be all 4 quadrants. It won't happen in just one quadrant. It will necessarily happen in all 4 quadrants. And we will do it by trial and error, like we've always done it in the past. So that's why I am cautiously very hopeful about the future. But it's important for some of us also to be doing the personal work and the inner work, which means not just working on higher states of consciousness, but working on our shadow selves, because that will be part of the whole.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, with my question, I wanted to go into the direction that, for instance, who is programming machines we are using, like self-driving cars? You know, when there is the question, do you run over the children or do you send the car down the cliff? Who is programming that? And this is a really, I would say, heavily philosophical question.
Yes, it
and
is.
if now engineers have to decide it, who is deciding these things, you know? So and then when the algorithms decide what you can do and what you cannot do in our material world, and who you are and who are not, you are not. I totally agree with what you said, that I don't think that algorithms can replace the soul part, even if they deny that it exists, the people who are dealing with this, you know, but I don't think they can. But coming back to the aging thing, does that mean, as we were talking about the 4 quadrants that we have to develop in all four quadrants, that we, as getting older, we actually should learn technology and the use of technology, instead of saying, oh, no, I don't learn to have a cell phone and I don't learn to a computer. What do you say here?
No, I'd say that's completely up to each individual. If you're interested or it's useful, go ahead. If it does not serve you, don't bother your pretty little head with it. Why? Why stress yourself? I mean, if you can live happily without this stuff, I mean, I personally am really eager for self-driving cars, because we're at an age where somebody's going to have to take our car keys away from us. You know, we went through this with my husband. I went through this with our parents. I mean, you get to an age where you're not a safe driver anymore, and it's much later with some and much earlier with others. But here in the United States, I mean, driving a car is your autonomy. That's how we get around. We don't have the public transportation like you do in Europe. You lose your car keys, you lose your car, you're stuck at home. It's very much a self-identity and a self-sense. I mean, so it's psychological as well as practical. But if you've got self-driving cars, especially now with Uber, if you can afford it and you have a smartphone and you know how to use it, you just tap the Uber thing and somebody will come and pick you up with a few minutes and take you where you want to go. These cars are going to be self-driving in a few years, and I, for one, am cheering them on, because that means those of us who are aging, and this is North America more than Europe, but we no longer lose our ability to get around, provided we can afford. But cars are going to become a subscription service rather than something we own. We will only need 1/10 of many cars, and because I mean, the statistic, now this is North America, the average car stands idle about 95% of the time. It's a terrific waste of resources, very inefficient use of resources. When cars are a subscription service, then we only need 1/10 as many to get the same amount of stuff done. And here's the thing, and just to assuage your anxiety, and yes, I take your point about what do you choose, this or that, and who's programming the algorithms. I predict, you and I are going to live long enough to see whether I'm right or wrong. I predict that the insurance for self-driving cars will be far lower than the insurance for cars driven by human beings, because there will be far, far, far fewer accidents with self-driving cars, although they will not be perfect. But a car driven by an algorithm does not drive distracted, does not drive drunk, does not drive when it hasn't had enough sleep, and so on. And so my prediction is that they will, after we work out the glitches, you know, we learn by doing. After we work out the glitches, they will be far safer. That's my prediction. And I think it's a great thing for people our age.
Yeah, this is a really good argument, which I haven't thought about yet, because I'm living here in Italy in the countryside and without a car here. And that's also the reason why I actually would like either to sell or have younger people here living with me, because when I'm 10, let's say hopefully in 10 years, I'm still okay. But in 20 years, if I make it, then
Yeah.
I might not be able anymore to drive a car, you know, to get go shopping or something.
And the chances are excellent that you will live that long, because that's the way it is nowadays. Now, here, I wonder if we can harness our network here to find you. You need a marketer, for one thing, for your, what is it, Paradise Integrale?
Paradiseintegrale.com.
Yeah, I mean, why harass yourself to be a marketer when that's not what you do well or gladly? There are people who love it, who would rather do that than anything else. We need to find you one of those, and we need to find you some congenial youngsters who would love nothing better than to live where you're living and help you run the place physically.
Yeah, I have a person actually who would love to stay here, but I cannot pay him. You know, he is great in doing, he's working the all day, he's enjoying to cut down trees and to dig whatever, but he needs to earn some money for, you know, and so it's too bad.
Now, here's another thing. I mean, with the new internet, I literally mean this. I see each human being as a gray cell, and with our internet connections with each other, like our link now through Zoom, this is a synapse. Yes, we've sent out dendrites, we formed a synapse. We human beings are becoming the brain and central nervous system for Gaia. Gaia is awakening to a whole new level through us. And I mean this quite literally, as well as in all sorts of lovely abstract ways. As we extend broadband reach out into the countryside, it would be possible for people to live out in a beautiful natural place and make a high-level living by doing whatever younger people do online these days. And I've seen this in my own life. My husband and I live in Berkeley in the urban environment for half the year, in the heart of the gourmet ghetto, where you can stroll out and get all sorts of wonderful things. So we don't really need a car here. But then we live half the year up on the North Coast, 100 miles north, right on the Pacific Coast in the Redwood Zone. We have this lovely little cabin in the Redwood Forest. We're surrounded by redwood trees on three sides, and we have a view out over the Pacific Ocean, and it's idyllic, but it's rather rugged. We don't have central heating. So we're only there for the warm half of the year, because at our age, you know, chopping wood, like you were saying, plus not having central heating. So, and it gets very wet there and cold in the winters. So we migrate, we have a migratory lifestyle. And what we did recently up where I live, it's an unincorporated community called the Sea Ranch, kind of a utopian community. We recently got together and basically formed our own broadband supply company. We have very high level broadband access in this very remote area. It's very hard to get to. You have to drive over a mountain, very windy mountain range to get, windy roads on a mountain range to get there. So it's pretty remote. But now that we've got that, and starting about 2 years before, people from Silicon Valley started buying in to the Sea Ranch more and more over the last 4 or 5 years, because now we have, you can make a living as a Silicon Valley type, living in this bucolic, remote, beautiful rural area. And maybe commute to San Francisco once a month or something, but you can do your high level IT, whatever it is, from way out there. You can make that level of a living, and you don't have to be limited to living in one spot. So this more and more is becoming possible.
For younger people, yeah.
For younger people, and they can take care of us, right? When we
So hopefully we will find somebody. Actually, I already have sometimes people who come here for, you know, for either holidays, or I have this exchange help for staying here. Yes. And some of them make their money online. But unfortunately, this guy who loves to work in the countryside, he is not really
It's not a tech.
No, it's not a tech. No.
I wonder what other service he could provide that would add value to the people around there. I mean, this is what this new level of connectedness will make possible once we're over some big hurdles. But whatever we love to do, if we find a way to do it in a way that provides some value to other human beings, I mean, we don't need to go have a big career in the job. I think, in getting into the futurism, I think a basic minimum income in some form will become the norm eventually.
Yeah, we have to wait.
But that's going to take a while. You know, we're going to rely on people like our friend Ryan and so on to start plugging those social institutions in place. But this new AI and the bots and the algorithms are going to be doing so much of the grunt work just to do the basic materials of living and the basic services, that frees us to be our creative selves, our caring selves, taking care of each other, growing a garden and sharing it with the local people, taking care of our aging relatives, or hiring somebody to take care of our aging parents if we don't live nearby. There are people who love to do that kind of caregiving. That's where their hearts and their passion is. They can hardly make a living doing it. We can do public art. We can do art in public places. We can do performances. We can make music. We can stay healthy. We can train as Pilates trainers and all those wonderful body therapists. And we can get the massages when our 67-year-old muscles are aching. I mean, these new algorithms and bots and AIs will free more of us to be who we want to be, doing what we want to do for each other. How we get there I see that. I see it in some detail. I've been tracking some of the technology. How we get from here to there? Well, I'm going to rely on people like Ryan, some of our younger friends.
And Californian people, you are so far ahead in all these things. We are really sort of halfway medieval.
Yes, but you also in Europe are farther ahead in the as the whole community, farther ahead in the green, pushing up into the second tier. I'm using integral jargon now.
Not in Italy.
Well, there's been a huge regressive backlash. And this is not just Europe. It's all the developed. This is something very big is happening. And this is my historical shift. We are going through a major transition from an old era to a new era. This is the 7th such transition in human history. And I have tracked this. I actually have an Excel spreadsheet. And we've done this 6 times before. We can do it again. There is a new era that we can hardly yet imagine yet. But we're going through a dark age. We're going through a time when everything we know is breaking down. And these new algorithms, we look at them with great fear and mistrust, and rightfully so, because they're very powerful. But where we're going to misuse them is not in the algorithms, it's in our hearts and minds.
As always, when it's used well, every technology, it's not the fault of a technology if it is used well or badly. That's really... we come back, we make the circle, we come back to the shadow work and to growing up. And this is connected with aging, because the older you get, the more time you have to grow up.
Yes, and that's why Ken Wilber nailed it again. It's the youngsters and it's the oldsters, because we have the time. Mm-hmm. And the youngsters have the energy, and they're not all yet plugged into their careers and their families that they need to devote 100%. So it's the oldsters and the youngsters who push us ahead. Push. Yeah.
And we are part of the oldsters, and we are trying to do our work to push evolution by raising consciousness. And the specific topic we had today is raising consciousness about getting older. That's not only horrible, and the contrary. I think it's enriching when we see it in the right way. And even dying, at least be there for other people when they die. And for me, I had been several times in this situation. Last time with Mark, it's now 9 months or something like that.
That recent.
Yeah, it was in June. So yeah, and it is stressful, super stressful, but it's also very much enriching. And you are also, you have a playground, let's say, for practicing being in the present moment, because the day is not a whole day anymore, but it's a sequence of moments, and you go from one moment to the next moment. You don't plan anymore like next year or next month or next week or tomorrow when it's coming near to the death experience, but you are just there and do what is needed to do. And this is in many ways very satisfying, despite of the stress you are undergoing. And I wouldn't miss any of these experiences to have been there for my mother, for an ex-partner, or now for Mark. And it's when I first with my father did the decision not to shy away, but be there. And that was when I was 27.
Wow.
And it was really really still difficult, and I had a hard time to work it out afterwards, and it took me 20 years. But I decided not to go away and be there. And I didn't, I wasn't there when he really passed, because we did exchange with my sister, and this day I was not there. But I don't regret it. And that gave me the possibility later on be helpful to people who were in the situation where everybody else was confused and even loaded their own psychology on the dying person.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and loaded them with responsibility. Poor guys. And
Yeah.
I could be there to be helpful. And that was really deeply satisfying. And I assure you, this is an experience which you can get for free. And it will help you grow for sure.
Yes. Do we have time for me to say any more, or are we at the end?
Just some closing words, maybe.
Okay. Totally endorse what Heidi said. It was always a blessing. Sometimes it was a hard blessing, but always a blessing. I would not want to drop a minute of it. And boy, will the people around come up with their weird trips and projections, and in their distress, throw it on the dying person. And that's why they need us to be there as gatekeepers, if nothing else, so that we can block them, literally kind of keep such people from coming in the door. There is so much we can do for each other if we're not afraid to be present.
Exactly. And there I do a little bit publicity. We had a conversation with doulas and people, hospice workers in the Conscious Living, Conscious Dying series. You can figure that out where it is in the wisdomfactory.net, and there under our series you find Conscious Living, Conscious Dying, and also on the Conscious Aging, because now I put these two topics together because for me it seems to be connected. So you can get some information, what you can do and how you can approach the dying process of a loved one or whoever you desire to accompany. And don't shy away of it. It is a great, great experience. So at this point, Karen, thank you very much, and thank you the audience for watching and connect with us. And you know, if you have a story to share about your experience of aging and of accompanying being with the dying, or maybe near-death experiences or something like that, connect with us and we will find a way to talk with you. Okay, bye-bye.